the Run. I'm Remso W. Martinez, CEO of Marketer on the Run. For those of you that don't know me, I've been a social media and digital marketing professional for close to 10 years. And this podcast is going to hopefully give you some insights as a business owner and as a freelancer or a corporate marketer. So that way we can learn from each other, have some fun in the process, and actually do what we want, which is make some money out of our efforts. I think marketing is in a renaissance era. The amount of marketers and newbies to the field that I'm seeing really excites me, especially as we have so many technological changes. Market-wise, we're recording this episode in January. Well, no, now it's February. January felt like it was forever, and then January felt like it was for 5 minutes. But we're recording at this time, beginning of February. And, the market is different. The last year we saw a lot of people getting hired. Beginning of Q1, we're seeing a lot of people get laid off. Sadly, we're seeing a lot of full-time positions starting to disappear in the big, Fortune 500s. We're seeing a lot of them pop up in small businesses. We're seeing nonprofits and NGOs go for contractors and less for full-time marketers. So this is where hopefully we'll be able to give you the ideas and solutions you need to make the best decisions for yourself, whether you're a marketer or a business owner. So let me just tell you a little bit about Marketer on the Run. The philosophy here at this company is simple. You built something awesome, and we want you to brag about it. You spent a lot of time, sweat, and money to learn a skill, bet on yourself, and put something important out into the world. And the last thing you need to do is learn every detail about digital marketing and advertising on top of all your other responsibilities. So my philosophy, which I've developed through a lot of trials and tribulations and challenges and everything you can imagine under the sun, is, I hope, pretty simple. Empowering business owners and nonprofits and their teams through our expert knowledge and wisdom, craft methods that bring you success and not stress, and build a relationship with a focus on your long-term growth. I won't be doing that alone in the first season of this show. Instead, I've got the social media maven herself, Megan. She has been a nonprofit digital marketer for some time. She started in the social media space. I'm so happy to have her on this first season as we kind of get through this journey of figuring out a lot of the big challenges going on in the digital space together.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for selecting me. It's quite the honor.
Well, it was a long process. You had to go through like some John Wick trials, a lot of things that we can't legally talk about, but that's why we have contracts, right?
Made my way to the top.
Yeah.
Hunger Games style.
Yeah. We want to go ahead and give a moment of silence for the people that did not make it. Their egos are dead. Their professional careers are just they've hit a wall. Nothing gets better once you get rejected by me at this point. But Megan, let's kind of look at how things are right now. I think a lot of people are in a doom and gloom camp, or they're looking at this as the best opportunities ever, especially be a marketer. In many ways, AI is making our jobs way easier. In many ways, the ability to learn knowledge online, to learn skills, to reach out to clients, to reach out to people, it's more democratized than ever before. I remember when I was starting off in 2014, I was just doing blogging and social media management. Digital marketer was not really a title at the time. Social media manager was not really a title at the time. You had your comms people, then you had your advertising people, and they were all basically the marketing teams. And you didn't really have people that were marketers. Fast forward now, it's a completely different environment. I think the ability to learn and the ability to develop your skills and actually test them out in the real world has never been easier. And I for those of you that don't know me, I did a podcast for several years called On the Run. It was a show about everything. And the big thing that I addressed to people was that, we're entering a time in an economy in which you've got to have multiple streams of income, in which you've got to be able to develop skills on the fly. And I always thought that marketing and copywriting were the skills that if you could understand them, you'll never go hungry. And I think it's so funny because I was listening to old episodes as I was just getting my mind into things. And I remember I started off as a Fiverr freelancer. I was doing social media graphics. I was writing copy. I was writing sales ads and stuff like that. And I had to learn everything I had to learn from YouTube primarily. HubSpot Academy wasn't really a thing. A lot of these free or extremely affordable online marketing courses out there were not available at the time. So I think that I'm part of that generation of people that had to like really, really figure it out the hard way. And luckily, I'm looking at this now, and it's easy to say, well, people these days have it so much easier.
Mhm.
But in my way, they didn't have to work as hard as me. But I'm like, you know what, like a rising tide floats all boats. It makes it better. So,
Mhm.
how's your career been? How did you actually get into social media? And what have you just seen in the years that you've been doing it so far?
Um, well, not to, like, age myself, but I do remember after graduating doing the HubSpot digital marketing courses when, in the middle of I was a COVID grad, so that,
You had a
shifted
lot of
things
time
a
on
little
your
bit.
hands.
Yeah, it was like, well, graduated, thought I'd have, all my job prospects at the time were like, "Yeah, we froze hiring thanks to COVID." Like, sorry. I was like, "Okay, great." Um But yeah, I mean, I studied marketing in school, but honestly, what difference does that make? I feel like when you really learn by being on the job and doing things on the job. I had 2 like marketing sort of comms internships where I did sort of like half graphics, half like social media management, and just really liked it. Liked both of those things a lot, kind of equally. And my first job was a very like small business. The marketing was like me and my boss essentially. And, we got to do all the things. We got to do email marketing. I got to do our video editing. I was also our graphic designer. I was just our digital like director in a lot of ways because I was also at least a decade younger than everyone else at that company. So they're like, "Oh, the young social media stuff."
You
All
can do the
the
Facebook, right?
Yeah, the Facebook, the Instagram, the TikTok, the whatever. So yeah, just learned a lot in that first job by doing different things, and then got hired at the place where I had interned previously, and stepped into more of like a leadership role, especially as other people left, and now sort of manage our small social media team. Just 2 people underneath me, but yeah, doing a lot of the social media stuff, the analytics, the concepts, content marketing, marketing other people's content, finding ways to promote their content with creating our own sort of graphics, videos, etc. I feel like just wearing all the hats is very common as
I
a
feel like
marketer.
yeah, I mean, I feel like to be a marketer, you have to do all those things. And it's funny
Yeah.
when you look at like big companies, like I joke about this all the time. And at first I was really like, I was really envious. Now I look at it as like, that's an aspiration. But like the guy
Mhm.
who was hired to run the Facebook page for Coke makes $300,000 a year.
Mm,
That's just to run one page
that must
on
be nice. Yeah,
one
we have
platform.
multiple pages and multiple platforms for everything. It's kind of like I feel like we're like our own little in-house little marketing agency, but all in-house, but the way the organizational structure is kind of divisional, so
And I
it's
mean,
interesting.
that's how I hear a lot of people starting out. Like
Mhm,
when I was doing social media, I wasn't necessarily doing the social media because that's what I was hired to do. I was actually a blogger, and then they were like,
mhm,
"Hey, can you do this for me? And can you do this other stuff? And you're really good about it. How about you do that?"
mhm,
And I was in politics for a while, so when I was doing campaigns, there was no one else to do these things, and I'm like,
yeah,
we have to be on Facebook, we have to be on Twitter, we have to be sending
mhm,
emails. So you kind of just like absorb these roles over time. And I
mhm,
think as a marketer, that's a great thing to do because then you really get to decide what you do like doing and what you don't like
mhm,
doing. I love doing email marketing. I love
mhm,
social media. I hate doing website creation. I hate
mhm,
making graphics, but I can do all those things pretty well
mhm,
if I had to. So that's kind of where I want to start things off today. The title of the episode is "Never Say Never Again" because it's this concept that I see a lot of business owners and marketers struggling with, which is what do I commit to in marketing? I feel like,
mhm,
and we both share a nonprofit background. So for today's purposes, I'll say nonprofit leader or small business owner, kind of interchangeably, folks. So kind of
mhm,
come with me on that. But it's this idea that we probably have hit 1,000 times, and we'll hit it a million times more, which
mhm,
is marketing is a loss. It's not an investment. And I argue every time that if you don't see marketing as an investment, it will be a 100% loss. It's about what you're doing, because, just putting a graphic on Facebook and then, indiscriminately throwing money at it does not guarantee success. That's what people
Mhm.
see it as. It's like, billboarding to a degree.
Mhm.
You don't see many people selling billboard space anymore.
Yeah.
But when they do so in certain areas, and they develop their billboard advertising in a very specific way. And
Mhm.
it's kind of funny, because the first time I actually got to like work and observe under a marketing professional was in direct mail. And
Mm.
this is really old. Okay. This is like 2015. I was an intern at a place called Freedom Works. And, they were doing a lot of really awesome stuff on social media at the time in terms of graphics and video and email campaigns. But they made a lot of money in donations from direct mail. And I remember one time, he fussed for hours about how he was going to have the letterhead look. And I was just like, why does this matter? And then at one
Mhm.
point, I saw him stick a dollar bill in the envelope, and he strategically placed it so, like, on the little window where you see the address, like, that's actually printed on the letter itself, you could see the outline of the dollar bill. Now, you didn't know
Mhm.
whether it was a dollar or not, but you knew it was cash, and you knew that
Mhm.
by the way it was shaking that it was actual money. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking of that, and I'm just like, what's the ROI on this? And he's like, we send out about 1,000 of these, and we'll probably get about 100 people sending something back. So that's 10%. And then he's like, of those 100 people, they pay enough money to not only make up for the 1,000 letters we sent, but more often than not, we will make a 2 to 1 return compared to the money that we're getting just online. And
Mm.
that blew my mind. And it
Yeah.
was all about the intention. And
Mhm.
he was scrutinizing over how he had his letter set and how he presented the envelope and everything.
Mhm.
And he was like, the dollar doesn't do anything for me. Most of the time they send the dollar back. And I'm like, they send you back the cash. They're like, yeah, they like it so much. They send the cash back. And I'm like, that is some baller stuff right there.
Yeah.
So what I have right now is I was wondering, like, what are the questions that people, particularly folks that are hiring a marketer, should ask themselves? And I found a whole bunch of different questions online. So I went to one of my favorite places, ChatGPT, and I straight up asked, what are the 10 questions that a business owner should ask if they're wondering whether or not they go ahead and hire a full-time marketer? And people, you think I'm joking? No, I like ChatGPT. We're gonna be talking about AI and the right way to use it, the wrong way people kind of mess with it from
Mhm.
time to time. But I thought that the list it gave was pretty good, and maybe we can scrutinize it here and there because it always
Mhm.
needs a little bit of that. So I'm pulling up the document now. Here is the first question: what are our main goals for digital marketing? I feel like that's the one thing that they should really understand before they even start interviewing you. Megan, I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but I have interviewed for digital marketing positions at companies,
Mhm.
and I have to ask them this question. They're like,
Mm.
we need somebody to do a thing. That's what they're
Mhm.
usually asking me. We need somebody
Right.
to handle email or to handle
Yeah.
social media. But my
Mhm.
question to them is like, what are our goals? Because it's
Mhm.
always, build brand, drive engagement, get people to
Right.
buy or donate, but
Yeah.
they have a hard time answering that sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I definitely see that too. I feel like I mean, marketing kind of what you were saying about the people feel like it's a loss. I feel like marketing is everything in a sense. It's almost like they say, "Oh, you're always like trying to sell something," or, whether it's product, service, even a nonprofit, like, it's how you present yourself. It's how you present your products, your services, whatever your business may be. So, but I feel like within that, there's just so much within marketing. It's just a little bit of everything. So I feel like
Yeah.
people need to narrow down and figure out what their goals are. Like, are they at a point where they're, starting out as a business and they just need to raise awareness? They need to do like the basic social media setup, basic, customer building list or whatever. Or are they a little bit farther along where we have a loyal customer base, but we need to re-engage those people or, reach new audiences, or like their sales aren't doing well and they need to like expand their audience, or are they just trying to like retain what they already have? And I feel like a lot of people just don't have the focus, and I think there's so many tools out there that having the focus is important to be able to figure out what you're doing in the first place and why.
Yeah, anyone that's ever been part of a young adult Christian youth group at a church who's had like, a relationship talk has probably heard this term. It's DNI, determine, no, DTN, determine the DTR. Wow, I'm all over the place. It's DTR, determine
I'm
the
off it.
relationship. Determine the relationship. That's a big thing. And I feel like for a
Yeah.
lot of organizations, big or small, determining the relationship you have with your audience is the thing that they struggle with because they don't see it as relationship based, and everything in
Mhm.
life is relationship based, business more so than others. When it comes to marketing and sales, and it's always funny, on some like marketing podcasts and stuff, you'll hear people that have an antagonistic relationship with sales. I love sales because you can't have a sales team without a marketing team, and vice versa.
Mhm.
I think you have to have a good balance in both. I say
Mhm.
marketing is developing a relationship broadly. It's
Mhm.
kind of like if you're in a situation where you're on a dating profile. We'll use that as an example. And you want to set it up well. You want a good
Mhm.
photo, you want a good like about me section. You want your facts about you to be the nice things and not the weird stuff that you people always find out about you later. So that is what I consider like the marketing ends. That
Mhm.
that is putting yourself out there to find people. So finding
Mhm.
your donor, finding your activist, finding your client, finding a
Mhm.
future business partner. And then the
Mhm.
sales component comes down to when you message somebody or somebody
Yeah.
messages you. And then you have to try and seal the deal and make sure that if you set something up, they actually show up.
Yeah.
So, it's when you're trying to determine what the goal of your marketing is, it should always be how do you foster relationships with people who don't know who you are and don't know what you do, and maintain the ones with people who do know who you are and do know what you do. I think the
Mhm.
problem is discovering folks out there because it's
Mhm.
it's a law of averages game. That's something I learned when I had to work in a sales role at some point. You're going to
Mhm.
get a lot of people that say no to you. If you
Mhm.
stop asking folks, you're never going to get the people that say yes. And most of the time you
Mhm.
don't really have to sell to them. So, it's finding the broadest group of people who most likely fit your target audience, your target customer demographic,
Mhm.
and just trying to start that conversation. And then over time, what I see is that you have a lot of small businesses, for example, who
Mhm.
they have a great customer rapport. The customers like them, especially when it's a small business, you're dealing with just like one or two employees, it's fine. But like, what if you buy something from them and then you don't hear from them for like 5, 6 months. And then a new business comes in town and they do basically the same thing. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe I need to buy this thing or whatever. You're
Mhm.
probably going to go to them because they reached out to you. Whereas if you were getting like, an occasional seasonal coupon, or maybe you
Mhm.
saw like a funny video or something, or, just facts about the items or services that you're purchasing on Facebook. So
Mhm.
that way you could learn a little bit more.
Mhm.
It's that freemium content, which is supposed to, help feel like you're being empowered. You're not just being told, come spend, spend, spend.
Mhm.
You stay top of mind. And I feel that it's always leaning one way or the other. It's either we need more people or our current people aren't coming back to us.
Mhm. Yeah. No, exactly. I love your marketing definition too because I think some people will think, "Oh, like, that's for the marketing team or that's for the sales team," but it's like, I think everyone is a marketer, or at least has to be in this day and age with how interconnected everything is. Like, you can make the argument even, like, a teacher is like a marketer because 'cause they're trying to figure out the best way to present their lessons to their students and trying to convince them that learning is important and studying and all that kind of thing. So it's like marketing's just everywhere. And, yeah, narrowing down what type of marketing you need to do within your job, whether you are an official marketer title or not.
Yeah. With nonprofits specifically, they don't have a sales team, they have a development team.
Right,
And
exactly.
I say that all development people, all development
Mhm.
officers are marketers.
Exactly,
Not
yeah.
all marketers are developers though. The
Mhm.
marketer is supposed to funnel. The marketer is supposed to
Mhm.
bring people in.
Yeah.
The development person is supposed to have that individual one-to-one relationship, but as
Mhm.
they speak with people, as they get to know them and discover what they like and what they do like and what they're more focused on, they need to understand how those facts relate to the marketer. So that's
Yeah.
why you have to have that communication going back and forth, because as the marketer brings people in, that's when the retention model has to come into place, and the development person
Mhm.
has to then feed that back to the marketer to say, "Hey, this is what you're
Mhm.
doing good. This is what they don't like, and this is
Mhm.
what we're not doing." and
Yeah.
you have to have that one-to-one relationship. So,
Mhm.
by defining your goals early on, you're gonna really understand what you need to do because depending on your scope, depending on what industry you're in, what niche you're
Mhm.
in, you may need somebody to do a lot of things for you. You may
Mhm.
also just need somebody just to manage your Facebook and Instagram. But
Mhm.
when you define those goals, that's what's gonna be the most important conversation you have when you start an interview process, or if you're a marketer and you're in an interview process with a potential client or the potential
Mhm.
employer, that shows them that you also know what you're doing.
Yeah, and that you're interested in actually helping, because I think a lot of times, like, interviewing people, they're all like, "Oh, I can do this and I can do that." And, look at me trying to put the best foot forward, which obviously they're interviewing. That's the whole point. But showing that you care about what the organization's goals actually are and how that you can be an asset to them is very important, as opposed to just like, look at me, I can do A, B, and C very well. Like, okay, gold star, but how can you actually help us? And like, what value can you add to the organization that we aren't already doing, as well
And
as
that
being able to learn?
Yeah, and that leads directly into our second question. What specific digital marketing skills are most important to our business? You got to identify if you need expertise in areas like SEO, pay-per-click, content marketing, social media, email marketing, analytics. I feel that and there's a lot to unpack there, but I
Mhm.
think there's a simple answer of that. When you're dealing with small nonprofits, you're dealing with email and you're dealing with social media. When
Mhm.
you're dealing with most like B2C, business to customer, type of retail environment specifically, it's
Mhm.
almost all social media. So I would
Mhm.
say that if you're just starting out as a marketer, if you're just starting out as a business, and you're more in like a retail environment,
Mhm.
those are the 2 things that I would say you wanna know about,
Mhm.
and you gotta have kinda going from day 1. Is
Yeah.
that fair?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, because I feel like it's almost like just the base level of like a lot of marketing, projects, campaigns, whatever. Is just having a basic understanding of both of those is
I
very
feel
important.
like what also turns into a problem for a lot of places, and this was a problem for me in the nonprofit space. I was hired to be a digital marketer, which also meant I was the photographer. I did all the corporate
Mm,
headshots. I
yeah.
was filming and editing
Mhm.
documentaries, podcasts, emails.
Yep.
I was doing the SEO and
Yeah.
PPC and everything, the
Yeah.
lead gen. But the one thing that they really cared about all of a sudden one year was web development, and they got
Mm,
mad at me when I didn't know anything about it.
yeah.
And at one point, one of my bosses was like, "Well, you act like we're," because I was complaining. I was like, "We need to hire somebody to do this. I cannot do this." And they're like, "You ask like we're asking you to code." And I was like, "You are asking me to code.
Yeah, isn't that I was gonna say, am I
Like
missing
people go to
something?
college to learn this exact specific
Yeah.
thing, and I know nothing about this. I cannot deliver that."
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where it's like, you're a master of a lot of things, but the one thing that they actually want in the situation, you're like, I gotta tap out, guys.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially I feel like in my first job, I was like that. I was wearing all the hats. I was like the premiere video editor, like I guess sort of producer more or less too. It's not like we had a fancy studio or anything, but I was editing all the videos.
Were you scheduling the guests?
You just
Were you writing the show notes?
it was just like doing the graphic design, sending out like our daily newsletter, all the social posting, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just all the things. And then I feel like my breaking point, I mean, it wasn't even like it was that hard of a skill, but it was just the fact I was already doing so much in like the digital realm. They were just kind of, and it's not like it was particularly hard, but it was sending out these like it was like development work as opposed to just marketing. And like you said, I think marketing development in a good nonprofit should work very closely hand in hand. I think unfortunately a lot of times that's not the case. People treat them as totally separate departments and they don't work as closely together as much as they should. But I mean that's just my opinion and experience. But um yeah, I was mailing out these pledge letter things and we had like super old printer that just like would not work. It was like the mail wizard in Microsoft Word. Like
Ugh.
it shouldn't have been that hard, but I feel like just my skill level with digital was just so different. It was more creative and like administrative organizing type, doing the social scheduling and strategy and like, taking care of all of those to-dos, that it turned out to be like at least a third of my day, which was already very jam-packed. Um was just trying to print out these pledge letters and, like, driving to the post office on my way home to mail them out, all these things. So not quite the same as you with the coding, but, just it's not like it should have been difficult, but with everything else that we were already doing, and I feel like that's
The
can be the
scope
problem with
gets
marketing.
wider and your
Yeah,
knowledge begins to dissipate to a degree.
yeah, and I do feel like in that role as well, there was some I don't know, he's like I would also, like, update the website and whatnot, but the website was already there, so it's just updating it, but there were certain things it was just, like, a very old school website, and there were certain things you would have to, like and even for our newsletter, it was very old school how they did it, that it required some like, the code was already there, but you had to edit things within the, like, HTML code or whatever it
Oh,
was.
that's a
So it
headache.
wasn't like I was writing code or anything, but there were just very specific things that needed to be done like, it was just so we ended up updating part of my job was, like, updating to something more modern. I think when I left, they went back to their old way, which is fine. I'm not there
We were
anymore, but it
using
was
something
just
called Titan CMS, and I was like, "Please just go to WordPress."
yeah, it was just, like, editing all these things that were very I mean, it wasn't particularly hard because 'cause they'd said but it was very, like, "It has to be done this way," kind of thing, and it was like, "I don't think this is the most efficient way to do this in 2020, 2021," whatever it was.
Speaking of which, all that does lead once again, see, folks, it's like we know what we're doing or something.
Transitions.
Something, like, professional like this should automatically be done, and we're doing it. How does digital marketing fit into our overall marketing strategy? Like what you mentioned,
Mhm,
development has in a nonprofit environment, development has to talk to marketing.
mhm,
You have to be able to understand the physical stuff you're doing when you're sending out letters, when you're sending out coupons, when you're
mhm,
sending out, donation forms and stuff like that. How is
mhm,
that also gonna integrate with your online efforts?
mhm,
Are the graphics the same, or is the copy the
mhm.
same? Or does it look like 2 separate campaigns that are gonna
Yeah.
confuse people? Understanding how digital efforts align and support your broader marketing and business objectives is important. So just don't think ever when you're hiring somebody that digital is its own thing. Everything
Mhm,
feeds within each other. And if you have a
mhm,
functioning company or organization, that's got to be just a non question. Like you have to be able to connect people and they have to be communicating. And that's how you're ultimately going to get the best return on your investment. This is a contentious one.
mhm,
And depending on whether or not people are looking at full time, part time, or freelancer, this is where people get uncomfortable with it because
mhm,
it's not like sales where you're gonna get the exact number for reports and everything back. You can get
mhm,
analytics and reports that tell you an idea of how people interacted with stuff, but people treat impressions and stuff versus how much money did we immediately get back.
mhm.
What is the budget for hiring a digital marketer? This is what chat went ahead and shot at me. Decide how much you're willing to invest in digital marketing efforts, including the marketer's salaries, tools, and advertising spend. I feel like this is the one thing that always gets sloppy. I've never seen this
Mm,
in any other type of hiring environment for any other type of um, of position. I feel like they want the marketer to come in with their own tool set. They want the marketer to come in with their
mhm,
own understanding of certain softwares and programs. They want
mhm,
the marketer to do everything through like organic means. And they
mhm,
are like, well, maybe next quarter we'll discuss advertising. And then you're like, oh, so you're not giving me an ad budget. So I don't have anything to really work with right now.
mhm,
Here's what I'm going to say. Do some Glassdoor research for your salaries. Look at how
mhm.
much they're working for, and based off what we discussed earlier, if you need somebody to do everything, you're gonna have to pay them more. If you want somebody to
Yeah.
just do email or SEO or PPC,
Mhm,
then it depends on the experience and how much
mhm,
ad money you want to actually put towards that. But
mhm,
that's where I come with. It's like, folks, you got to do your research. Marketing has been
mhm,
around for a long enough time. You can find how much salaries are and what the average is, and understand the specific rules and outcomes based off your goals.
mhm. Yeah, I like that ChatGPT there brought up the tools as well, because I think a lot of people just think, "Oh, I'm just gonna hire, like I need someone to help with social media and digital, so I'm just gonna hire, like, a young person out of college so I don't have to pay them that much and whatever." And they're young, so they know, how the
They
screen
know the Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, they can
They
do the
know the
Facebook, they can
TikToks.
do the Instagram, like, um, and yeah, just kinda throw them like, I feel like they don't always know how much that stuff takes to do well, like how much time and luckily with the technology, there's so many automation tools that can make things go
And they're
faster and make
affordable.
things more efficient. Yes. But yeah, that is the other thing is it's always interesting to have like I feel like again at that first job, they wanted me to start editing videos, and I was like, "Okay, I need Adobe Premiere Pro to, like, really be able to do that well." And it's like, "Well, why can't you just use iMovie, or why can't you use this random free thing that we found on the internet?" And I was like, "Do you want it to be done well?" Or I mean, not that there's anything wrong with
Yes.
those tools, like, if you have someone who's that's their preferred tool and that's what they do best, fine, by all means. If it's not that advanced of a project and those things work, by all means. So I was like, "This is what I have the most experience with." Not that I'm not willing to learn something else. If it was really that tight of a budget, then, fine, I'll find a way to make it work. But it was interesting because I remember there were 2 people at the company. One who was like the head honcho and, like, my boss's boss was like, "No, we can pay for that, whatever tools you need to get it done well." Whereas the other was like, "Why can't you use this free thing?" And even now, like, the company I'm at uses Adobe Creative Suite, Premiere, Illustrator, Photoshop, all those things. And I feel like that's pretty standard for most companies. And it's not, I mean, it's expensive, but I feel like for business, it's totally worthwhile. Um, but even now, it's like, some random person will be like, "Why can't we just switch to this?" I'm like, "We've been doing this for years. The whole, like, organization creatives that are in the organization know how to use this, and this is our standard. So, like, why are we just gonna change it to save like $20 a month?" You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, so that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind, the tools,
Yeah.
because those are always changing too. Like, and even like which social media scheduling thing you use. If you use Hootsuite or Buffer, or like we use Meltwater, like there's all types of different ones. So figuring out which one you want to when hiring a marketing person is important to know up front, because especially marketers are going to have different skills and different ones
Preferences
they've
and knowledge
worked
on
with.
those things.
HubSpot.
Yeah. So
All
so
different.
this leads into the next question, which we kind of just answered here. Do we have the tools and technology in place to support digital marketing efforts? Here's the big question, which is how much do you want to pay for those things? And
Yeah.
do you even know what you need and what you don't need? I've gone
Mhm.
into environments where they've had a whole bunch of paid subscriptions and stuff that they
Mhm.
were just wasting money on because they weren't doing
Yeah.
it. They got Getty Premiere, which is giving you
Mhm.
like, or whatever the max is, where they're giving you like 30 credits a month for
Mhm.
images. But
Mhm.
that's a lot of money. And
Yeah.
like unsplash.com or
Yep.
Pixabay or something else, or
Mhm.
just Wiki
Pexels.
Commons can
Yeah.
easily do it. Like, do you need, like, if you're working like
Yeah.
for a publication, like a
Mhm.
newspaper or something, get Getty. If
Yeah.
you're putting out one blog a week on generic topics, just go to Unsplash where you're not paying.
Right. Yeah.
And, when you're hiring somebody, and if you really don't know what you don't know, which is a fair thing,
Mhm.
you don't, my thing is, like, business owners aren't professional marketers, so we shouldn't hold them to those standards sometimes.
Mhm.
But ask and this is around the time that you're like in that final interview, like ask your potential candidate, like, what is the list of things that, based off what you know about the company, that you think we need, that we'll have to budget for?
Mhm.
If they should be able to give you kind of like their Christmas list of what would make sense. And then
Mhm.
from there, they could provide some different options for things based off
Mhm.
how much you need it and how much you're willing to spend.
Mhm.
The other thing is, like, consider that when you're hiring for an employee, you're gonna have to set aside a certain amount of money to buy tools, cameras, microphones, that type
Mhm.
of thing, or Hootsuite, Mailchimp, Canva
Mhm.
Pro, those stuff.
Mhm.
If you hire a contractor, your contractor's probably gonna have their toolbox. The contractor
Mhm.
themselves has the stuff they like working with, and they pay out of pocket for those subscriptions as a workplace expense. But understand, when you hire a contractor, one, you don't have to worry about renewals, you don't have to worry about paying for all that stuff. But don't be
Mhm.
surprised when the contractor is charging you a little bit more. But
Mhm.
then again, for a contractor, you're not paying, you're not taking care of the payroll for payroll
Mhm.
taxes. You're not paying PTO and healthcare and
Insurance.
everything else.
Yeah.
So you got to also just keep that in mind. Like, sometimes it kind of
Mhm.
levels out more often than not. And I'm seeing this. The contractor is just going to be cheaper and more, more
Mhm.
timely, and because they know that that relationship can end any minute. It takes a lot to get rid of
Yeah.
somebody. But
Yeah, that's very true.
yeah, but next one, what are our expectations regarding ROI from digital marketing campaigns? This is this is tricky. This is tricky. What you should always
Mhm.
say is that it
Mhm.
depends on the campaign. It
Mhm.
depends on what the goal is for that campaign, and we need to have a sit down. Never
Mhm.
give a hard number.
Yeah.
Never give a hard number. Never speak broadly, because when you're
Yeah.
talking dollars and cents for this, that's just not that's not a conversation you have in an introduction.
Mhm. Yeah, I think setting goals, but also, like, being conservative. You don't wanna I feel like one thing I've learned, because I feel like I talk too much, you know? So I feel like one thing that my
This is
bosses would
why
call
you're
me.
on this show, so I can take breaks in between.
Well, they always say they're like, I feel like I'm gonna butcher
In
this
fact, I'm
actually,
gonna put
but
the camera on you so I can grab my charger. See, folks, a real professional would have put this in post edit, but I just like to go with the flow, have you be with us in the moment. So there you go.
live a little, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but one is like, don't overpromise, or no, don't overpromise, or you can help me with this. What is it? The don't overpromise, underdeliver thing?
Don't over, no, under promise, over deliver.
Yes, that's what I was like, I know I'm getting this wrong, and because I had a bad tendency to do that, where I would say, "Oh, yeah, I can do this, this, and this," because I know I
I'm trying to
can,
get the camera on you. Why doesn't this work? Okay,
but
folks, I'm just gonna have to go grab my charger. Yeah, so
sorry.
don't overpromise and underdeliver. So you want to underdeliver a
Yeah,
little bit. So then
uh-huh.
no, you you want to underpromise so that way you can overdeliver and you're
Uh-huh.
always saving yourself in the process.
Yeah, it's like give conservative estimates for how much you think it's gonna come out. I have a problem where I feel like I would overpromise and overdeliver, and it's like, then it doesn't look as impressive because you're like, "Oh, I said I could do all of these things," and kinda overestimating, the capabilities, or like, really for me, it's time because I'm like, "Oh, I know I can do all these things, but I'll think it's gonna take less time than it will." So, just something to keep in mind, know sort of what your personal tendencies are, if you have any, to do those types of things, and
Yeah.
try to adjust them accordingly.
Well, this one is what separates the wheat from the chaff, the men from the boys. How will we measure and evaluate the success of our digital marketing efforts?
That's very
Easy.
important, yeah.
You set standards, you understand your baseline, and you measure and compare accordingly. The
Mhm,
problem that I find is that you have to not set expectations high necessarily, but you have to compare to what was being done. Now,
mhm.
I went to a place where in 5 years their Facebook page had only gone up by 13 followers. I kid you not.
That's crazy.
In
What
the
were they
one
doing?
Nothing. And the 1 year that I was, well, they were doing stuff, but it was not the right stuff because they had a
Right.
secretary doing it.
Yeah, okay,
And
yeah,
that's another thing. Like if you want professional, like hardcore outcomes, you gotta hire a hardcore professional,
yeah.
just in
Mhm.
anything else. It's like I'm not
Right.
gonna hire my kid's neighbor to like put pesticides around my place. I'm gonna hire an
Yeah.
actual exterminator.
Right.
Um, so in 1 year, I doubled their total following.
Mhm.
So 100%. Like,
Mhm.
just in 1 year,
Mhm.
very fair budget, just good basic social media practices for the Facebook, which was the one thing that they really wanted to focus on. So,
Right.
like, the one thing I had to tell them was like, listen, your first month, when you look at like, and it wasn't Meta Business at the time, it was the Facebook Business Manager with all the
Mm.
analytics and stuff like that.
Real throwback, yeah.
Yeah, like that's like caveman stuff. You're gonna see like 400% growth or 5,000% increase in
Mhm.
engagement or stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
they would throw you like these wild numbers. Hootsuite would throw some like wild numbers. It's like
Mhm.
if I tell you right now that this was like 5,000% and 6 months from
Mhm.
now, I'm telling you something was 50%. Understand that that is extremely subjective given the context and the circumstances.
Yeah.
Because when you go from, 0 to 100,
Mhm.
it's gonna mess everything. So my thing is
Right.
like, when you're going into an environment, especially in the nonprofit realm, I see it way more often in the small business realm, where
Mhm.
people just don't do things for months on end.
Mhm.
Do a 30, 60, 90-day study. What
Mhm.
was it for 60 days look like of the new study? The next 60 days and the next 90 days. While you do that, also look at what was the last 30 days like before you, the last 90 days before you, the last 60 days before you. For some
Mhm.
people, they like to do quarters. What did the quarter look like previously before you started making changes? What does the quarter look like from the moment that you start doing it to
Mhm.
later?
Yeah.
Because now, after you get that presentation, then people will actually understand things. And that's the thing that I, as a marketer, wish I did better when I
Mhm.
was starting off. I wish I could take things from like marketer language and make it in like normal people language.
Mm.
Because if I tell somebody, well, you have a 15% open rate on your email, so that's great. and they
Mhm.
hear 15%, almost like you're grading papers. Like 15%, that's an F. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
that's 15%. That's more like a B
yeah,
minus,
right.
given the circumstances.
Yeah, saying what the industry standard is, like, that's why this is
Yeah.
higher, you know?
So, like, you gotta be able to set KPIs that make sense, but you also have to be able to communicate that to your team because, budgets are determined by answers, and half the time, the
Mhm,
person giving you your budget isn't uniquely qualified to understand what it is that you're putting out there. That's
mhm,
not to say that they don't have the right to tell you what's right or wrong, but that's just the situation. Like, you have to accept
mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So,
I think
yeah.
that's important too, especially with working with, because like, the 2 people that I manage are, like, entry level, both fresh out of college, like, this is their first job, and so I think one thing is when setting those standards and, like, assigning tasks is explaining, like, "Here's why we do this. Here's" and kind of gauging what their expectation is, because I think sometimes it can be like, "Oh, well, this just seems stupid," or, like, "This doesn't make sense to me," and it's like, once you explain, "This is why organization-wise, we're focusing on this," and then I feel like when they get it, then they start to actually, like, you know, really put their all into whatever the task is, or at least, do it to the best of their ability. Whereas sometimes if they aren't fully understanding what the goal is or why things being done a certain way, they can just kind of be like, oh, well, I'm just going to half ass this.
I had a boss who was a communications guy, old school communications guy, knew nothing digital. And I
Hmm.
basically had to spend my first couple months teaching him exactly why I did things and how I did them and what I expected. And
Hmm.
at that point, I found it very frustrating. He was eager to learn because
That's good. Yeah.
he wanted to work with me on stuff like that. But it was
Hmm.
frustrating because I had to provide like a giant essay to request $100 to do a lead gen campaign.
Hmm.
And eventually we got to the point where, I was basically getting like, and at the time I remember thinking like, this is so much money. Now I look back at that and I'm like, that's peanuts. But like,
Yeah.
I remember I was so excited when I got 500 a month ad budget.
Yeah.
And they just indiscriminately said, because he had seen what was going and he knew that it was just easier to just give me the money. He was like, Remzo, here's $500 a month. Spend it accordingly. Anything you don't spend will roll over into the next month.
Hmm.
And that was just like one of the best times for growth, period,
Hmm.
because that was when we were making everything happen. But,
Yeah.
it only came because I was patient with him and I had to understand it's like he
Hmm.
doesn't know these things. So
Right.
why should I expect him to understand? And he should be
Yeah.
critical because how does he know that I know what I'm talking about unless I can explain it to him?
Yeah. I feel like it is a good test of knowledge when you have people like that in a way, because it really forces you to, like, think about and be able to back up your thoughts. I feel like a lot of times too, you'll get kind of like, at least I experienced this, where there's the one that's really open to learning, and then there's the other who's so set in his way and is giving you pushback at every little thing that you're doing. And then you really have to kind of make the case of like, no, this is why. Also, this is what I was hired to do. Like, if you were that good at comms, they wouldn't have brought me on, not to my own
Not
horn
like a
or anything,
diss.
but
Now,
it's like,
like stay in your lane. I'll stay in my lane type
exactly,
thing.
yeah.
I had I've worked with development people who were amazing, like really
Mhm,
great people. They made my life
mhm.
so much easier. I worked with development people that made my life a living hell.
Yeah,
And it was like because they thought they knew marketing more than me. And my thing is
right.
like, well, do I go into your development meetings and tell you that your copy sucks?
Yeah,
Or that you need to go out and get coffee and when you do that you actually have to make an ask and you can't just like expense your
yeah,
like coffee date with people like
yeah.
it's a difficult thing. And like I dealt with the president, like I joke about this pretty often, who was part of like this giant like alliance of nonprofits to do a very specific campaign that we were all going to sign our names to, all these different
Mhm,
organizations. And his thing was like, I want to create a thing like this technology that will be able to find people who, and I'm just gonna make this up for legal reasons, but like we need people who like to wear like red hats, have kids, and live in Wisconsin and have been in the news. And I
mhm,
looked at him and I'm like, okay, so let me just get this straight. You want people that wear this hat, have kids, live in this area, and have been in the news? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's called Google.
mhm.
That's called web scraping, where you use keyword scraping across social media and search engines. And then you stick it in an Excel sheet where you set your standards and then you fill in the information as you get it. And he looked at me and he's like, well, that's not good enough. And I'm like, well, I'm not I'm not an app developer. I know nothing
Mhm.
about it, but everything you just said is what I've done a million times before,
Mhm.
and that's how I'm gonna do it now." And he was like, "Well, I promised them this tool." I'm like, "But you didn't talk to me." And
Yeah.
then here's what ends up happening. I go to my boss and my 2 interns, and the 4 of us sit down and we do this task exactly how he asked, using Google and different social media platforms. And
Mhm.
we got him like a long list of the exact type of people that we had to reach out to in order to complete this project. It was like 100 people. Now, he hadn't set
Mhm.
up a metric. He didn't say, "I want 10." He just said, "I want a lot." A lot isn't a
Okay,
number.
yeah, that's not a very
So
helpful
I
thing.
set the standard. I said, "I want 10." So guess what? We got 100. And
Uh-huh.
then we turned it into him, and he's like, "Well, that's not good enough. I promised them thousands." And I'm like,
Well, that's what you should open with, man, like
but it was also like, so you made all these promises. One, you wanna make a new piece of technology that is so specific that I hope you're at least selling it, man, so we can become millionaires. But two, it's like you also didn't talk to anyone on your team, particularly the people
Mhm.
that know how to do this. So you
Mhm.
set up unrealistic expectations.
Mhm.
So it was one of those things where it's like, now that's an egregious example.
Right.
The one time I'm like, and I had to explain to him how Google worked, and that was just
Mhm.
like a total waste of my day. At that point, I'm like, okay, I gotta start looking for other gigs
You're
at
like,
this
"Let me
point.
update my old resume."
Yeah, time to get on LinkedIn. But anyway, okay, so we got chat. This is where I'm disappointed with you. We already kind of answered this one. Are we looking for a specialist in a particular area or a generalist who can manage multiple aspects of digital marketing? I think one that's subjective, like what we've kind of said,
Mhm.
but do you think that when you talk to other organizations or businesses, like a lot of people have like the digital marketing manager title now? It's more
Mhm.
it's more relevant than like social media manager. But do you
Yeah.
feel that when you speak to most digital marketers, and maybe this is good for employers that are looking to hire people who have digital marketing manager, digital marketing director on their resume. Do you
Mhm.
find that most people are generalists, or do you find that more people are specialists? I would say I I'm a generalist who
Mhm.
has worked in specialized positions, but more often than not, the moment I have to take 3 or more roles, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm a general marketer at this point.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a little 50-50. Like, it really depends on, like, what type of company they work for. Like, obviously, if it's smaller, they're going to be wearing all the hats and being more general. But I do feel like even the specialists that I meet have experience as generalists, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
they specialize in, like, X now, like, maybe in social now, but they still kind of know the basics of email. They still kind of know the basics of, like, graphics. Or I think just with, like, honestly, I feel like internships in the last like, decade or so have really taken off a lot. Like, I feel like they and not that I feel like they've always been a thing, I guess, or for, like, the last, few decades. But I don't know, I think they're a lot more competitive now than they used to be, than even, like, when I was in school. I feel like I kind of get that sense, even, like, just from interns that I interview. It's like, I feel like internships are just a lot more, like, common. So I think in that sense, a lot of people, even if they haven't worked in all the fields, they interned and did a lot of different things.
And I
So I feel
think
like with the rise of internships, it's like a lot of people have just dabbled a lot more than previously, and just with technology in general and the way, colleges are.
I think employers are also getting more savvy too. It's like, for
Mhm.
videographers, like, a guy who films might not be able to edit. They know how
Mhm.
to edit, but like the companies and organizations hire full-time editors for a reason.
Mhm.
So I think it's more like based off what they need and what they've had experience with. I would say more often than not, um, I think a lot of digital marketers are just glorified social media managers. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that, candidates or freelancers are billing themselves as anything other than what they are. I think they're honest about what they do and what they haven't done. But
Mhm.
I think the industry needs to understand it more. It's like, marketing and advertising are different. But if you
Mhm.
hire a marketer who only does a certain type of advertising, then that person becomes an advertising specialist. And
Yeah.
over time, like people are starting to understand there's a difference between like, um, digital marketing and just somebody who manages all marketing. Like, everything I do
Mhm.
as a digital marketer is predominantly digital, but I still like I understand traditional marketing. I will tell small
Mhm.
businesses you got to do a direct mail campaign. You got to go put up a booth somewhere and give out free samples.
Mhm.
Like, marketing is how you communicate. Digital is just communicating through digital means.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Down to the last two. I like these questions. Chat
I
ain't
think
dumb
yeah, they were
today.
fun.
Yeah. How will the digital marketer collaborate with the rest of our team? Um, it's not how will they, it's they have to. You got to
Yeah.
understand who they report to, and you got to understand what are the other teams that you're working with. Your marketer has to work with your sales team. In a nonprofit, your marketer has to deal with your development team. And yeah, I mean, I think the thing is also, how will like I've been in environments where you've got to film employees for like video purposes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Some people like that, some people don't. Some people are like, we don't ever want you in our space. Some people are like, you could film our lives. So
Mhm.
I think the marketer has to immediately be able to work with the people who are bottom of the funnel, which is the sales, the people actually like,
Mhm.
getting money from people. But
Mhm.
more in line with that, the marketer also has to be able to communicate the story and the identity of the business. So the
Mhm.
marketer also has to advocate for that. I think the marketer also has to really take a lot of ownership in who they talk to and how they organize things.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I feel like working within the team and within the company, like marketers, I guess, yeah, marketers and salespeople or development if it's nonprofit, but you have to know like what the service is or what the product is that you're offering. I think that things get lost in translation a lot of the times. And that's,
Mhm.
I feel like something I've experienced a lot working for nonprofits of like development doesn't know this is the big thing that's going out and they should because that's what they should be marketing to donors is like, oh, we have this huge project or we have this huge report, this is a really big deal. And if like development doesn't know what's going on, then how are they going to go to donors and be able to like make an elevator pitch of you know and same thing with sales if they don't know what the main focus is. It's like even if it's like for a product and maybe they have a big campaign, like it's a beauty company and they're really trying to sell their mascara or something. And that's what marketing is really trying to get out there. But sales is focused on lipstick. It's like, okay, where we have totally different goals and things in mind here. So I think just having that sort of cohesiveness is really important and finding ways to communicate effectively, like within the marketing team, but also with all the other teams that are part of it. Because, like we were saying earlier, it's like marketing just involves everything. It's kind of, and that's what makes it fun. I think that's why we like doing what we do is you get to work with a lot of different people and you get to, sort of, there's a lot of interpersonal skills you have to develop and communication type of things beyond just your digital marketing job description.
Completely agree. Now we're probably down to a question that neither of us may be the biggest experts in, but I can at least give my opinion. Chat's really challenging me here. What is our timeline for hiring, and how soon do we expect to see results? I go with the magic 90-day model, which is
Mm,
30, 60, 90 days. Any type of marketing, especially if you're building an apparatus from scratch or whether you're taking a campaign from, start to finish, full life cycle,
mhm.
this takes time. I think 90 days is really a good enough time to show a positive result. So I would say
Yeah.
that, from when you hire somebody in an employee situation, the first month really is them just getting a handle of things. Don't
Mhm,
expect much. They got to implement new practices, they got to get the
mhm,
resources, they got to integrate with your current team, and they just
mhm.
got to get into the daily flow of things. Sometimes you're just picking up from where somebody left off. Other times you're picking off from where somebody left off 2 years ago,
Right. Mhm,
as was a situation I dealt with. So
mhm,
I would say that that's the first 30 days. The first 60 days is trial and error. That's
mhm,
figuring out what works. That's figuring out what doesn't work.
mhm,
It's asking for the additional tools and resources and help you need to get that done. And then
mhm,
by day 60 through 90, that's the best practices. That's where you're seeing everything that's kind of working now. You've really doubled
mhm,
down on that. And this is when you should be seeing your most maximum growth. So I
mhm.
would say, between nine, between 60 to 90 days is when you should start seeing those actual like positive
Results.
results. The
Yeah.
first 30 is 60 days, day 1 through 60, that's just figuring it out. But
Mhm,
it depends on it. Like, I've seen in freelance situations, I've seen it where it's like on day one you started seeing massive results, but it's like
mhm.
also what's the scope
Yeah.
of that? I was doing one
Right.
thing on one platform, giving the platform exactly the type of stuff they wanted, algorithm bait, And that was what
Mhm.
people wanted because there was also nothing going on before that. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're dealing with a lot of things, integrating social across different
Mhm.
platforms, and then email, and then you're doing videos and all this other stuff like that,
Mhm.
that gets a little bit more complicated, but that's
Mhm.
you kind of need more breathing time to figure it out.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all about the context. Like what you were saying earlier of like, oh, 5 years they grew 13 Facebook followers. It's like, okay, you start actually like
People think I joke
posting.
about that too. That was what was really funny. It's like, no,
I
they've been
believe it. I
posting.
totally believe it. Um, but yeah, it's like that how you're gonna measure the success there. Like obviously it's not gonna take much to start growing that. But if let's say the growth was super high and you're changing things up and it's a new person managing it, like, they have to find the brand voice and whatnot. And even just learning like best practices and especially if it's a nonprofit, like what you're able to do as a nonprofit, like there's a lot of nuances. And I think beyond the 90 days too, it's like that's when you like 69, I think is when you start seeing like, okay, I'm glad we hired this person. Like there's some results because I feel like people, as they start to learn, they're either going to be like, okay, like hopefully, especially if you hired someone with like a good work ethic, once they start to learn those basic skills, then they can start excelling and bringing their creativity. But I think just learning kind of the baseline of what you're supposed to be doing is really important and asking a lot of questions. I think it's frustrating sometimes when people come in to a job and they think they know everything, and it's like you've never done this before, like you don't know. Like learn how we do it, and then if you have suggestions for how to change it, by all means. But first, learn what we do, why we do things a certain way, because it's like sometimes people come in with an idea. And it's like, okay, that's not a bad idea, but we've tried it. That doesn't mean we can't try it again or like modify it this time. We're open to that. But first, like learn the skills and do your job effectively before you come in and just try to like make shortcuts or like have a reason to. If you're like, oh, well, I think this could be done more efficiently, then we'd have more time for this other thing. Then that's fine. But it's another when you're just like, oh, this takes too long and then I don't have energy to do anything else. So we should just do something. It's like have reasons for how you want to have
And I
things,
mean that
you
also
know?
goes with every other question we've asked, which is, do you have the tools at your disposal? Do you have
Mhm.
a record of what you specifically want to do and what the numbers look like
Yeah.
for that? How do you set up KPIs? Is the marketer
Mhm.
doing all that, or are you
Mhm.
gonna, also give him or her an idea of what metrics you want them to measure? I mean, it
Yeah.
goes in hand with the other thing, which is like, who are they communicating with, and are they working together?
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like after that 90 days too, you really can start to see people excel, in
Yeah.
whatever they're doing. Because it just it takes time and as you get in the flow of things, like, being 3 years at my job, I feel like I know way more than when I was at 1 or even 2 years. Like you learn as you go and the challenges will surely certainly come. It's guaranteed. So overcoming those, it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, Megan, those were the 10 questions. And I think, we went a little bit long today. I think for a first episode, for something as big as this topic, it needed the extra time. And I'm sure that people, hopefully walked out a little bit with some more than what they came into this conversation with. Folks,
Mhm.
I want to go ahead and thank you again for tuning in. This season is all about understanding the mindset, the tools, the environment that we're working in both the nonprofit and the small business space. During the lockdowns, so many small businesses closed for several weeks and then never opened back up. During the
Mhm.
lockdown, so many nonprofits had to lay people off and had to halt efforts because people just couldn't be as charitable as they wanted to be. We're in a different situation now, and I mean different. Different doesn't mean better. Different doesn't mean worse. It's just different.
Mhm.
Whether we do better, whether we do poor, is going to be a result of our work and how we adapt to those situations. Renzo Gracie, big Brazilian jiu-jitsu legend, once said, "We can't control the wave, but we can learn how to surf." And as marketers, I think we have to do more surfing, and learn on the task and learn on the job than a
Mhm.
lot of other people. So, Megan, thank you for joining me in this journey, folks. Please go ahead and connect with me on Instagram at GoRemso. That's GoRemso, and go ahead and learn more and contact me over at marketerontherun.com. That's marketerontherun.com. But wait, I'm giving everyone a free resource in the show notes below where you'll go ahead and get all the questions listed that we discovered. So that way you can go ahead and ask these yourself with your business partner or your team. So you can go ahead and bring on a marketer. I've also got the Small Business Owners Digital Marketing Handbook. It's a free PDF that you can go ahead and grab and start to understand the lingo, the methods, the practices, the things that you need. It's absolutely free, and it's in the show notes below. So that's all she wrote, folks. Until then, the mission continues. Market like you mean it. Good night.